Next chapter, support and movement. Now, we talked about movement as a characteristic of living organisms. The simplest form of movement is cytoplasmic streaming, as seen in unicellular organisms like the amoeba. Other organisms show movement by cilia, flagella, or tentacles. Sometimes, movement may result in a change of place or position, and this kind of movement is called locomotion. Different types of locomotory movements are swimming, walking, running, climbing, and flying. Support and movement in plants. Now, movement enables plants to adequately adjust to the environment. It can occur at cellular level, for instance the swimming of male gametes in bryophytes and pteridophytes, and growth of the pollen tube to bring about fertilization. Plants also exhibit movement at organ level, such as tropic and nastic movements, which enable the plant to obtain resources from the environment such as light, water, and nutrients. They also help the plants to escape or avoid harmful stimuli such as high temperature. Apart from this movement, plants also need a strong framework to support their weight. The efficiency of processes such as photosynthesis and pollination depends on this strong supportive framework. The stem is the most important plant organ in supporting the leaves and other branches. This is possible due to the presence of supporting tissues that give the plant mechanical strength. These tissues include parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, xylem vessels and tracheids, as well as phloem fibers. The plant stem is made up mostly of parenchyma tissue. It consists of elongated living cells with a thin cell wall made of cellulose. The cells are polygonal in shape and have a large central vacuole as well as intercellular spaces between them. Parenchyma forms the ground tissue in the central cortex and the peripheral pith of stems and roots. In the leaves, they contain chloroplasts and are called chlorenchyma, which help in photosynthesis. In aquatic plants, they contain large air cavities that help in buoyancy and are called arenchyma. In fruits and vegetables, parenchyma cells are filled with starch, which help in food storage. Collenchyma consist of elongated living cells with cell walls made of cellulose and pectin. The cells are thickened at the corners and have little intercellular spaces. They occur in the peripheral regions of the stem, below the epidermis in the leaf stalk, leaves midrib, and also in herbaceous dicot stems. They provide mechanical support and flexibility in plants. Sclerenchyma are long, narrow cells with no intercellular spaces between them. Sclerenchyma consist of dead cells with lignin deposited in their cell wall. They occur in the vascular tissues of the stem, veins of leaves, and in the covering of seeds and nuts. They provide strength to the plant. We saw that the xylem consists of tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Tracheids are tubular dead cells that help in water transportation. In addition, their cell walls contain lignin, which provide mechanical support. Vessels are elongated dead cells with pits that transport water and minerals. They are usually present in woody plants and provide mechanical support. Xylem fibers are also dead cells with lignified cell walls that taper in their ends. They also provide mechanical support. We also saw that the phloem consists of sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma, and phloem fibers. It is the phloem fibers that provide mechanical support to the plant. They are thick-walled, elongated dead cells. In herbaceous stems, the tissue is relatively soft and easily crushed. Plants with this kind of stems are usually small and do not grow very tall. If they are deprived of water, the stems wilt, bend, and may even collapse altogether. Mechanical strength in these stems is directly related to the turgor pressure of the living cells of which it is composed. Some herbaceous plants are known to obtain support by twining around other plants, while others support themselves by tendrils. Next, support and movement in animals. Animals have a firm and rigid framework for support called the skeleton. The skeleton supports the animal's body, gives shape, and provides surface for attachment of muscles that facilitate movement. There are three types of skeletons: hydroskeleton, exoskeleton, and endoskeleton. Hydroskeleton is found in organisms such as earthworms and involves a fluid which moves within the body cavity due to the action of muscles. The exoskeleton is characteristic of arthropods and is made up of a substance called chitin. Chitin is secreted by epidermal cells and hardens on secretion. This exoskeleton supports and protects the inner delicate tissues. It is waterproof and therefore prevents excessive loss of water from the body tissues. The exoskeleton provides surface for attachment of muscles, which is essential for movement. Endoskeletons are found in vertebrates where the muscles are external to the hard framework. They are made up of living tissues such as cartilage and bone, and therefore they are capable of growth and repair. Locomotion in fish. Now, although life in water puts serious constraints on movement, the fish is well adapted. It has a similar shape like that of a boat. The middle portion tapers at its ends and forms a specific body shape known as streamlined body. This streamlined body offers little resistance to movement in water and facilitates swimming. In addition, the scales of fish overlap backwards, therefore eliminating resistance to movement as the fish cuts through water. The scales are also coated with mucus, which reduces friction as the fish moves in water. Moreover, the fish has a set of vertebral and segmented muscles that continue from the head to the tail. These muscles help the fish to propel itself from side to side as it swims through water. During swimming, the muscles of the front body curve the fish on one side, and simultaneously, the tail part swings in the opposite side. The process is then reversed and the fish swims ahead. While changing or reversing the position, the body gets a jerk that pushes it forward. A series of jerks makes the fish to swim ahead. In addition, the fins aid in movement. The fins are membranes supported by rays or spines that function in swimming or orientation in water. They perform three roles: help in swimming, giving directions, as well as keeping the balance of the body. Support and movement in mammals. Now, the three types of movements in human cells are amoeboid, ciliary, and muscular. Amoeboid movement is seen in some specialized cells such as macrophages and white blood cells. This movement is produced by the pseudopodia due to protoplasmic streaming. The other type of movement, ciliary movement, occurs in most internal tubular organs lined by ciliated epithelium. An example of ciliary movement is seen in the trachea, where the cilia moves in a coordinated manner to remove dust particles and foreign substances inhaled during breathing. Another example is the movement of the egg through the female reproductive tract, which is lined by cilia. The muscular movement can be seen in the eyes, tongue, and the limbs due to the contractile action of the skeletal muscle. Locomotion in mammals is brought about by the coordination of the muscular, skeletal, and neural systems. The human skeletal system. The skeletal system includes all the bones of the body, plus the joints where they attach to each other. The skeleton protects our internal organs, provides a framework for support and movement, stores minerals such as calcium and phosphates, and produces blood cells. Without the protection of our skeleton, even a simple blow on our head or chest could damage vital internal organs. The skeletal system of an adult is made up of 206 different bones, which come in 4 basic shapes. Long bones such as femur, short bones like the wrist and the ankle bones, flat bones such as those of the skull and scapula, and irregular bones like the vertebrae. There are 2 types of bone tissues: compact bone, which is dense, smooth, and very strong, and cancellous bone, which is spongy and lightweight. Both types contain living cells which help make repair when a bone is injured or broken. A typical long bone has a main shaft called the diaphysis, composed of compact bone, and 2 ends called epiphysis, composed of cancellous bone. The main shaft is covered with a membrane of living cells called periosteum, to which muscles and tendons attach themselves. Inside the main shaft is a cavity called the medullary cavity, which contains the bone marrow. Bone marrow stores fat, produces blood cells, and plays an important part in the body's immune system. The human skeletal system is divided into 2, axial and appendicular skeletons. The axial skeleton consists of bones that form the longitudinal axis of the body, while the appendicular skeleton consists of bones that are appended to the axial skeleton. The axial skeleton consists of 80 bones, which include the skull, vertebral column, ribs, and the sternum. The skull. The human skull is made up of 8 cranial bones that surround and protect the brain, and 14 facial bones that form the underlying structure of the face and support for the teeth. With the exception of the mandibles, Bones of the skull articulate with each other through immovable joints called sutures. Throughout the skull, holes called foramina serve as passageway for blood vessels and nerves. The largest one here is called the foramen magnum, through which the spinal cord, after emerging from the brain, continues into the vertebral column. Bones on the surface of the skull encase the brain, protect sensory organs, and serve as attachment surfaces for muscles of the head and neck. Cranial bones include the occipital bone, parietal bones, temporal bones, and the frontal bone. The other two bones only become visible when looking inside the skull. The sphenoid bone makes the anterior base of the cranium. It is a butterfly-shaped bone with a central body and two pairs of laterally projecting wings. These wings form portions of the orbit. The body of the sphenoid features a depression known as sella tussica, which houses the pituitary gland. Located between the orbits, the ethmoid bone makes up a portion of the cranial floor and also the roof of the nasal cavity. Facial bones include the nasal bone, the zygomatic bones, the maxilla, and the mandible. The internal and external skull bones articulate precisely, forming an intricate structure perfectly suited to its functions. The skull also includes a U-shaped hyoid bone and two air ossicles, one on either side. Each air ossicle consists of three bones: malleus, incus, and stapes. The skull articulates with the vertebral column with the help of two occipital condyles. The vertebral column has three main functions. It protects the spinal cord, supports the head, and serves as the point of attachment for the ribs. It consists of 26 differently shaped bones called vertebrae. Each has a central hollow portion called the neurocanal or the vertebral foramen through which the spinal cord passes. Anteriorly, we have the body, which is the weight-bearing section of the vertebrae. And posteriorly, we have the spinous process. Laterally, there are transverse processes which serve as surfaces for attachment of muscles. Connecting the body to the transverse process, we have the pedicle, and the transverse process to the spinous process, we have the lamina. Together, the pedicle and the lamina create the vertebral arch. We also have superior articular facets on top and inferior articular facets at the bottom, where the vertebrae articulate with each other. The vertebrae are divided into 5 groups according to the region they occupy. The neck region has 7 cervical vertebrae, followed by 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 1 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. In adults, the sacral and coccygeal vertebrae unite to form the sacrum and coccyx respectively. The first 2 cervical vertebrae, called atlas and axis, allow nodding and rotating movements of the head. They are quite different from the others. This is an image of the atlas or C1. A unique feature of the atlas is that it does not have a body or a spinous process. Instead, there is an anterior vertebral arch and a posterior vertebral arch. Replacing the body anteriorly, we have the anterior tubercle, and replacing the spinous process, we have the posterior tubercle. Laterally on either side, we still have the transverse process and also a transverse foramen or vertebratorial canal for passage of blood vessels. The neural canal is wide for passage of large spinal cord in the neck region. The transverse processes are broad and wing-like, offering a large surface area for attachment of the neck muscles. It has broad, large superior and concave-shaped articular facets which articulate with the occipital condyles of the head. This forms a joint which allows for up and down movement of the head. The axis is the second cervical vertebra, or C2. It is similar to all other cervical vertebrae with the exception of this prominent odontoid process. This forms a peg which fits into the ventral side of the atlas neural canal. The joint formed allows for rotatory movement of the head. The axis has a broad neurospine, wide neural canal, and wing-like transverse processes. From an inferior view, we can see the transverse foramen. Posteriorly, we can see the spinous processes bifid or split into two. C3 to C7 have common characteristics. The body is oval in shape. Posteriorly, the spinous process is short. The vertebral foramen or neural canal is triangular in shape. A unique feature of the cervical vertebrae is the transverse foramen or the vertebratorial canal, which is a hole in the transverse process. Passing through the transverse foramen is the vertebral artery, one of the arteries that head up to supply the brain. We can also see the superior articular facets, and here are the inferior ones below. Next is the thoracic vertebrae. Here on the left, we have a superior view of the thoracic vertebra, and on the right is the lateral view. Anteriorly, we have the body, which can be described as heart-shaped. Posteriorly, we have the distinguishing feature of the thoracic vertebrae, that is this long spinous process that slopes downwards. It is large for attachment of back muscles. The neural canal is circular in shape and is smaller than that of the cervical vertebrae. Laterally, we have the transverse processes and the superior articular facets, as well as the inferior articular facets. Another distinguishing feature of the thoracic vertebrae is these costal facets, and this is where the ribs will attach. Each vertebra has two costal facets on the body and one on its transverse process. A lateral view of the thoracic vertebrae stacked on top of each other shows that the first thoracic vertebra is much smaller than the last one. And this is because as we go down, the vertebrae carry more and more weight. Next, we have the lumbar region with 5 discs L1 to L5. All the 5 are similar in shape. They are quite large due to the heavy weight they have to bear. Anteriorly is a large kidney-shaped body or centrum. Posteriorly, we have this small and blunt transverse process. Posteriorly, we have this small, blunt spinous process. Lastly, we have the sacrum and the coccyx, which are two composite bones. The sacrum consists of 5 fused vertebrae. It articulates with L5, the last lumbar vertebra, as well as with both our coccygeal bones or the hip bones on either side. Distally, the sacrum articulates with the coccyx or the caudal vertebra, the remnant of our embryonic tail, which basically consists of 4 fused vertebrae. Now the ribs. There are 12 pairs of ribs, where each rib is a flat bone attached dorsally to the thoracic vertebrae. The first 7 pairs of ribs are called true ribs, as they are attached dorsally to the thoracic vertebrae and ventrally to the sternum by means of hyaline cartilage. The 8th, 9th, and 10th pairs of ribs are called false ribs. These ribs are not directly attached to the sternum, but join the 7th rib by means of the hyaline cartilage. The last 2 pairs are called floating ribs, as they are not attached to the sternum. The ribs along with the thoracic vertebrae and the sternum form the rib cage, which protects vital organs such as the heart and lungs. The remaining 126 bones form the appendicular skeleton, which includes bones of the limbs and their supporting girdles. Each limb consists of 30 bones. The bones of the forelimb or hand include the humerus, radius and ulna, 8 carpals or wrist bones, 5 metacarpals or palm bones, and 14 phalanges. The humerus is a long bone with 2 roughened projections called the greater and lesser tuberosities, between which is the bicipital groove. It has a long shaft for attachment of muscles, that is the biceps and triceps. The trochlea at the lower end articulates with the forearm. The ulna and radius are 2 bones found in the forearm. The radius is found on the side of the thumb, while the ulna is found on the side of the small finger. The ulna has a projection called the olecranon process, which has a sigmoid notch that articulates with the trochlea of the humerus to form a hinge joint. The wrist and the hand consist of 27 separate bones. Because of this large number of small bones, our hands are capable of more movement than any other part of our body. The bones of the hind limb consist of the femur or thigh bone, tibia and fibula, 7 tarsals or ankle bones, 5 metatarsals, and 14 phalanges. Another bone called the patella or kneecap is found on the ventral side of the knee. The femur is a long bone found between the hip and the knee. The head of the femur fits into the acetabulum, forming the hip joint. At the tip of the shaft are the greater and lesser trochanters, which are extensions for muscle attachment. The shaft of the femur leads to the lower end with expanded and rounded knobs called condyles. The condyles articulate with the patella or kneecap. They also articulate with tibia to form a hinge joint at the knee. The remaining 6 bones form the girdle bones, which articulate with the limb bones to the axial skeleton. There are 2 girdles, pectoral or shoulder girdle, and the pelvic or the hip girdle. Each half of the pectoral girdle consists of large, flat triangular scapula and a curved slender clavicle or collarbone. The scapula is situated between the second and seventh rib on the dorsal side of the thorax. It has a slightly elevated ridge called the spine, which projects as a flat expanded process called the acromion. Below the acromion is a cup-shaped cavity called the glenoid cavity, into which fits the head of the humerus to form the shoulder joint. In addition, the acromion articulates with one end of the clavicle to form the acromioclavicular joint, while the other end connects to the upper part of the sternum. The pectoral girdle plays an important role in the movement of the arms. The other girdle is the pelvic girdle, which consists of two coxal or hip bones. Each coxal bone consists of three bones: the ilium, ischium, and pubis. These bones fuse to form a cavity called the acetabulum, into which fits the head of the femur or thigh bone. The two halves of the hip bones connect dorsally to the sacrum, while these bones meet ventrally with the help of a fibrous cartilage to form the pubic symphysis. The pelvic girdle not only supports the limb bones, but also protects the abdominal organs like the reproductive organs and the urinary tract. In fact, the female pelvis is wider than the male to accommodate childbirth. Now we look at joints. These are the points at which two bones or a bone and a cartilage make contact. Joints allow for movement in the bony parts of our body as well as in locomotion. Depending on how bones are connected to each other, joints are classified into three major types: fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. Fibrous joints do not allow for any movement and are also known as immovable joints. Examples are the sutures in the skull. In cartilaginous joints, bones are joined with the help of a cartilage. These kind of joints are found in adjacent vertebrae in the vertebral column. Cartilaginous joints are also called gliding joints because the adjacent bones slide over each other and allow for a limited movement. It allows our back to bend, twist and turn like the vertebrae of the backbone, wrist, and ankles of our bodies. Synovial joints. Synovial joints are characterized by a lubricating fluid called the synovial fluid. There are several types of synovial joints. In ball and socket joints, one bone has a round head and the other has a depression or socket into which the head of the first bone fits. It allows for movement in all directions. Hip joints and shoulder joints are examples of ball and socket joints. The hinge joint works like the hinges of a door. It enables movement only in one direction. Knees, elbows, fingers, and toes have hinge joints. In pivot joints, one bone has a projection which fits into a ring-like ligament of another. It allows movement in many ways. For example, the joint between the odontoid process of the axis and the atlas allows the head to move from side to side, up and down, back and front, and sideways as well. Movement at a joint. At a movable joint, The bones are held together by an inelastic tissue called a ligament. The ligaments restrain movement of the bones and therefore prevent dislocation. At the joint, muscles are attached to the bones by an inelastic tissue called tendon. A muscle is attached at 2 points, the origin on an immovable bone and the insertion on a movable bone. Muscles which operate joints are in pairs and antagonistic. A muscle that brings about bending at a joint is called a flexor muscle, while the one that brings about straightening is called an extensor muscle. Movement at a joint can be illustrated by the action of the hinge joint of the elbow. In the arm, there are 2 antagonistic muscles, the biceps and triceps. The biceps are the flexor muscles, while the triceps are the extensor muscles. And now we look at muscles. Muscles play an important role in body movements as well as movement of internal organs. Without muscles, it would be impossible to bend, walk, or perform any activity. Muscles constitute 40 to 50% of body weight in adults. It is a special tissue that originates in the mesoderm. Properties of muscles include contractility, extensibility, elasticity, and excitability. Muscles can be classified based on their location, appearance, and the nature of regulation of their activities. Based on their location, muscles are classified into skeletal, visceral, and cardiac. Skeletal muscles are attached to the bones of the body by collagen fibers called tendons. These muscles are striated and are also called voluntary muscles because they are under the control of the nervous system. Skeletal muscles help in locomotion and different body postures. Visceral muscles, also called smooth muscles, are found in the inner walls of hollow internal organs such as alimentary canal and the reproductive tract. In contrast to the skeletal muscles, these muscles are unstriated and involuntary. They conduct peristaltic movement in the digestive tract as well as conduction of gametes in the genital tract. Cardiac muscles are found only in the heart. Cardiac muscle cells are branched, striated, involuntary, and nucleated. Several cardiac muscle cells assemble in a branched manner to form a cardiac muscle tissue. And finally, diseases and defects of the musculoskeletal system. So, the skeletal and muscular systems function in a perfectly coordinated manner. However, over a period of time, these systems may begin to show wear and tear or exhibit some disorder. One such disorder is myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune disorder that affects the neuromuscular junctions characterized by fatigue, weakening, and paralysis of the skeletal muscles. Another common condition is muscular dystrophy. It is characterized by progressive degeneration of skeletal muscle fiber. It is considered a genetic disorder. Another disorder, tetani, causes rapid spasm of muscles due to calcium deficiency. While arthritis is the inflammation of joints, a disorder commonly seen in elderly people. Elderly people also suffer from osteoporosis, which is characterized by a decrease in bone mass that increases the chances of fracture. It is caused by a decrease in levels of estrogen and is therefore more common in women. Gout is another disorder which results in inflammation of joints due to accumulation of uric acid crystals. Proper diet and physical exercises help the musculoskeletal system to remain healthy and optimally functional.